Imagine walking into your home, only to find a sight so horrifying that it completely shatters everything you thought you knew about your family. For Sherita Williams, this was her reality. A moment that would forever change the course of her life. On that fateful day, Sherita, a respected sheriff in Atlanta, returned home after a long shift, expecting the comfort of her family and a quiet evening. But instead, what she found was an unimaginable betrayal. Her father, Raymond Williams, once a figure of trust and authority in her life, was caught in the act with her own sister, Mariah. The shock was overwhelming. Sherita had always believed in the strength of her family. Raymond, her father, had been a constant presence in her life, someone she admired, trusted, and respected. Mariah, her younger sister, had always looked up to Sherita as a role model. But in an instant, everything she thought she knew about her family was shattered. But what drove a sheriff, a respected officer of the law, to shoot her own father 5 times? What could have possibly been so unbearable, so shocking, that it led Sherita to this devastating point? As the seconds ticked by, Sherita's mind raced, her emotions swirling in a chaotic storm. She had never imagined that the very man she had looked up to, her father, the one who had taught her to uphold the law, could betray her in the most unimaginable way. And her sister, Mariah, the girl she had spent years protecting, was a part of this dark secret. In the turmoil of those moments, Sherita was faced with an impossible choice. The pain of the betrayal, the shock of the discovery, it was too much to bear. Her father lay there, the man who had raised her, now the symbol of her heartbreak. And her sister, the one person she thought she could trust, had betrayed her in the most intimate and destructive way. What do you do when the unthinkable happens in your own home, when your family, the very people who are supposed to love and protect you, turn on you in the most brutal way possible? Today, we'll explore the chilling details of this tragic incident. A sheriff, once a beacon of justice and authority, pushed to the brink by the ultimate act of betrayal. A family torn apart by lies, secrets, and violence. If you're shocked by this story, please like this video, share it with others, and subscribe to our channel. Don't forget to turn on notifications so you won't miss any of our deep dives into true crime stories like this one. On the afternoon of June 14, 2022, Sherita Williams, a sheriff in Atlanta, walked into her home expecting to wind down after a long day of serving her community. She had dedicated years of her life to protecting others, to maintaining law and order, and to being a beacon of strength for those around her. But that afternoon, she was about to face a reality that no amount of training could prepare her for. As she entered the house, nothing seemed out of the ordinary. Sherita was accustomed to the quiet comfort of home, a place where she could unwind. But today, that comfort would be shattered. She walked down the hallway, expecting to greet her father, Raymond Williams, and her sister, Mariah. What she didn't expect was to find her father, the man who had raised her, in the most vulnerable and humiliating of situations, with her own sister. Raymond Williams, a man who had been a pillar of the community, the father figure who had always commanded respect, was now a broken man in Sherita's eyes. And Mariah, her younger sister, the girl she had always protected and loved, was caught in the same act. The sight of her father and sister together in such a way was something Sherita could never have imagined. The betrayal was far too real. Sherita Williams, a woman of immense strength and duty, had always prided herself on her ability to remain calm under pressure, to be the composed professional when things got tough. In her career, she had faced life-and-death situations, seen the worst of humanity, and always managed to stand tall. But nothing could prepare her for the personal devastation that was unfolding in front of her. Little did Sherita know, this moment, the one that would challenge everything she believed about her family's love and loyalty, was about to push her beyond her limits. The betrayal was too intense, the shock too overwhelming. Her mind raced, emotions surged, and in that instant, everything she thought she knew about trust, family, and the bond they shared was undone. This day, June 14, 2022, was like no other. It was the day that would change the course of Sherita Williams' life forever. She walked into her home expecting peace, but what she found was a nightmare that would unravel everything she held dear. From the outside, the Williams family appeared to be everything one could hope for. Raymond Williams, Sherita's father, was a well-respected man in the Atlanta community. Known for his integrity, his leadership, and his role as a mentor to many, Raymond seemed to embody the kind of strength and stability that others looked up to. His daughter, Sherita, had always admired him, even following in his footsteps by joining law enforcement herself. Their family seemed united, built on love, respect, and shared values. And then there was Mariah, Sherita's younger sister. Mariah had always been her closest ally, someone Sherita could trust no matter what. They were more than sisters. They were best friends, partners in crime during their younger days, and each other's support system as they grew older. Mariah had always looked up to Sherita, seeing her as a role model, and the bond between them was unbreakable, or so Sherita believed. But beneath the surface, something had been changing. For months, Sherita had noticed small, almost imperceptible shifts in the dynamics of her family. Her father, Raymond, once the steady anchor of their household, had begun to grow distant. There were days when he seemed lost in thought, distracted, and not the man Sherita had known all her life. His once open demeanor became closed off, his warmth replaced by coldness, and Sherita began to wonder if there was something she wasn't seeing, something she couldn't understand. Meanwhile, Mariah, her closest confidant, had also started pulling away. Their once frequent chats turned into awkward silences, and family dinners, once filled with laughter, became tense and uncomfortable. Mariah, who had always been so outgoing and cheerful, seemed withdrawn, as if she was hiding something, a secret that Sherita couldn't quite put her finger on. The connection they once shared seemed to fray, and Sherita's attempts to reach out were met with hesitation. She brushed it off at first, attributing it to the normal growing pains of adult life, but deep down, she knew something wasn't right. Every so often, there were those subtle, uncomfortable moments. The fleeting glances between Raymond and Mariah that Sherita had noticed from time to time, too quick to fully catch, but just enough to raise suspicion. The awkward silences at the dinner table, where no one seemed willing to speak up, as if an unspoken tension filled the room. There were whispers in the back of her mind, but Sherita, ever the strong and composed professional, ignored them, telling herself that these things were nothing more than coincidences. But could she have ever predicted the truth? Could she have ever known that behind closed doors, something so horrifying was taking place within the very family she loved and trusted? It was a betrayal of the highest order, one that no amount of preparation, no level of professionalism, could have shielded her from. Sherita had always believed her family's bond was unbreakable, but she was about to learn just how fragile those bonds truly were. On the day of the incident, it started like any other. Sherita Williams had just finished her shift, a long day spent serving the people of Atlanta. As a sheriff, her job required focus, composure, and an unwavering sense of duty. She prided herself on being someone who could keep a cool head in the most intense situations. But as she left the precinct that afternoon, Sherita didn't know that this day would mark the beginning of an irreversible change in her life. All she wanted was to go home, take off her uniform, and enjoy some peace and quiet. It had been a long week, and like most days, she was looking forward to unwinding. Her father, Raymond, had been spending the afternoon at home, and her sister, Mariah, would likely be there too, as she often was when Sherita was away at work. It was supposed to be just another quiet evening in the Williams household. But when Sherita arrived home that afternoon, things quickly took a dark turn. The house was quiet, too quiet. She stepped inside, expecting to hear the usual hum of family life, the sound of the TV, the clinking of dishes in the kitchen, or perhaps the distant chatter of her sister. But there was only silence at first, an eerie kind of stillness. As Sherita made her way down the hallway, she began to hear muffled voices, indistinct at first. They seemed to come from her father's bedroom. It wasn't unusual for Raymond to have a conversation with Mariah, but the tone was different. The voices sounded wrong. Sherita's steps slowed, and a knot began to form in her stomach. Something felt off, but she pushed the thought aside, convinced it was just her imagination. The closer she got to the room, the clearer the voices became. Now, she could hear the distinct sound of whispers, followed by strange pauses. Her heart began to race as her instincts told her something was wrong. This was not how things were supposed to be. Sherita's steps faltered for just a moment, but her feet kept moving, drawing her closer to the bedroom door. When she reached the door, the reality of the situation hit her with the force of a sledgehammer. Through the crack in the door, she saw them, her father, Raymond, and her sister, Mariah, in a compromising position. The shock was instantaneous. Sherita's mind went blank for a split second as the world around her seemed to slow down. The man who had raised her, who had always been a source of safety and trust, was now a stranger. And Mariah, her sister, the one person she thought she could always protect, was complicit in this moment of betrayal. In those moments, a flood of emotions hit Sherita all at once. Shock, disbelief, anger. How could this be happening? How could her father, the man who had taught her to uphold the law, betray her in such a devastating way? And her sister, someone she had always viewed as a partner, a trusted family member, had been hiding this secret from her all along. The very foundation of Sherita's world was collapsing in front of her. She stood there, frozen for what felt like an eternity, as the emotions swirled within her. The anger, the confusion, the overwhelming sense of betrayal. Her thoughts were a mess, a chaotic whirlwind of pain and disbelief. How could this be real? Was she seeing things? Was this just some horrible nightmare she would wake up from? And yet there they were, the truth staring her right in the face, with no escape. Sherita had always prided herself on keeping a cool head in the toughest of situations. But nothing could have prepared her for this. The man who had always been her protector was now the one who needed to be protected, and the sister she had trusted was now her enemy. For months, there had been subtle signs, moments of unease that had lingered in the back of her mind. The strange glances exchanged between her father and sister. The awkward silences during family dinners. The unspoken tension that seemed to grow with each passing day. But Sherita had dismissed them, rationalizing them away. How could she have known that these were the warning signs of something far darker taking place in the shadows of her family's life? As she stood there unable to move, Sherita realized that nothing would ever be the same again. The home that had once been a sanctuary was now a place of pain and confusion. Her world, which had seemed so solid, now felt like it was crumbling beneath her feet. If you're shocked by this story, please like this video, share it with others, and subscribe to our channel. Don't forget to turn on notifications so you won't miss any of our deep dives into true crime stories like this one. The next few moments unfolded in a blur, like a scene from a dream that she couldn't wake up from. Sherita didn't know what happened first, the sound of the gunshot, or the overwhelming weight of what she had just witnessed. It happened so quickly, but it felt like an eternity. The cold metal of her service weapon seemed to move in her hand of its own accord. She remembers it all, the tight grip, the sharp pull of the trigger, and the thunderous echo of the gunshot as it rang through the room. It was as if the noise didn't belong to her, as if she were detached from the reality of what was happening. As her father's body crumpled to the floor, Sherita's heart sank into her stomach. She watched him fall, his lifeless eyes staring back at her, and she couldn't shake the feeling that something inside her had died with him. The finality of it hit her with full force. There was no turning back. There was no undoing what had just been done. What followed was a whirlwind of emotions. Sherita stood there, numb, unable to fully process the gravity of the moment. Regret flooded her. What had she just done? Was it justified? Was it self-defense? Or was it something far more instinctive? Driven by raw emotion, guilt gnawed at her, but beneath it there was something else, a strange sense of relief. A part of her felt that in that moment, at least one of her burdens had been lifted. But that relief was fleeting, as it was immediately replaced by confusion. What was left of her life now? What was left of the family she thought she knew? In the aftermath of the shooting, everything Sherita had ever believed in, everything that had defined her life, crumbled in an instant. She couldn't think. She couldn't breathe. Her world had shattered in that moment, and she stood there, unable to move, unable to reconcile the events that had just unfolded. Her father was gone, her sister was left behind, and Sherita was now left to pick up the broken pieces of a life she no longer recognized. There was no going back. It didn't take long for law enforcement to arrive at the scene. Sherita's gunshot had echoed through the house, and the neighbors, startled by the noise, quickly called 911. Within minutes, officers were swarming the Williams home, securing the scene and trying to make sense of what had unfolded. But as the police entered the home, they found themselves not just investigating a crime, but the unraveling of a family's deepest, darkest secret. Sherita stood there, her hands trembling, as officers took over. She was immediately placed in custody, and as the law enforcement officers questioned her, the gravity of the situation settled in. This was no ordinary case. It was personal. The sheriff, a woman who had spent her life upholding the law, now found herself on the other side of it. She had never imagined she would be caught in the very system she had worked so tirelessly to serve. While Sherita was placed under investigation, the world outside the confines of her home began to react. Some of her colleagues, people who had worked alongside her for years, expressed their sympathy. They knew Sherita. They knew her integrity, her commitment to justice. They couldn't fathom how she could have committed such an act, but they also understood the emotional weight that had driven her to it. They wondered, could this be an act of self-defense? A moment of unthinkable shock that caused her to snap? After all, no one could truly understand what she had witnessed in that room. The betrayal she had felt, the raw emotions coursing through her. However, not everyone was so understanding. As the days passed, there were those who struggled to comprehend how a woman who had devoted her life to law enforcement could resort to such violence. To them, it was a cold-blooded act, a sheriff executing her own father, her own family. How could someone sworn to protect the law have taken the life of the person who had raised her? The line between right and wrong had blurred, and Sherita found herself in the eye of a public storm that she could neither control nor escape. The legal proceedings that followed were filled with emotional turmoil. Sherita's family, already torn apart by the betrayal, now found themselves divided even further. Her mother, devastated by the loss of her husband, was caught in the middle. Was her daughter justified in her actions, or had Sherita crossed a line that could never be undone? Her sister Mariah was left struggling with her own feelings of guilt and betrayal as the truth of the events unfolded. As the investigation continued, Sherita's colleagues and loved ones were left to grapple with their own feelings. The sheriff had always been a pillar of strength, someone they could count on in times of crisis. But now, they found themselves questioning everything they knew about her, her family, and what had driven her to this tragic moment. The case soon became a media sensation, attracting widespread attention across the country. News outlets, eager for a story, were quick to paint their own narrative. Headlines screamed about the sheriff who shot her father, her reputation crumbling with every passing hour. The public was divided. Some saw it as an act of self-defense, a woman protecting herself from the unimaginable. Others believed it was a cold-blooded murder, a daughter who had lost control and killed the man who raised her. Sherita's reputation was in question, but so too was her family's legacy. The Williams name, once synonymous with respect and honor, was now embroiled in scandal and tragedy. Some members of the community rallied behind Sherita, offering support and sympathy, while others distanced themselves, unable to reconcile the woman they thought they knew with the actions that had transpired. The family, torn apart by this betrayal, now faced the harsh reality that the story of their lives would never be the same. What had once been a tale of love and respect had now turned into a nightmare of unimaginable proportions. If you're shocked by this story, please like this video, share it with others, and subscribe to our channel. Don't forget to turn on notifications so you won't miss any of our deep dives into true crime stories like this one. What drove Sherita Williams to commit such a violent act? Was it a moment of uncontrollable rage, a sudden eruption of emotion brought on by the shock of what she had discovered? Or was there something deeper, a long-standing trauma that had built up over years, festering under the surface, waiting for the right moment to explode. The truth is, the motivations behind Sherita's actions are complex, layered with years of emotional turmoil, secrets, and betrayals that had been buried beneath the surface. Her response to that horrifying moment was not just a knee-jerk reaction to what she saw in front of her, but the culmination of years of suppressed anger, pain, and confusion that had slowly eroded her ability to trust the very people she had once looked to for love and support. Experts in psychology suggest that the sheriff's actions were not the result of a single event, but were instead the tipping point of a long-standing emotional struggle. From the outside, Sherita's life had appeared solid. She was a dedicated law enforcement officer, a respected member of her community. But within the walls of her home, there were cracks in the foundation. Her father, the man who had always been a pillar of strength, had changed over time. He had grown more distant, more secretive, and Sherita could feel that something was wrong, even if she couldn't quite pinpoint it. Her sister, Mariah, once her closest ally, had also pulled away, and though Sherita tried to rationalize it, something in her gut told her that the relationship between her father and sister wasn't as innocent as it seemed. The shock of finding her father and sister together in such a compromising situation was, as many experts believe, the final straw. It was a blow so severe, so devastating, that it shattered everything Sherita thought she knew about her family and herself. It was as if the emotional dam that had been building for years finally broke open. The rage she felt in that moment was not just a reaction to the physical betrayal she witnessed, but to the deep-seated emotional wounds that had been festering in her heart for far too long. Psychologists point out that family betrayal, especially of this magnitude, can trigger intense emotional reactions that overwhelm a person's ability to think logically. The shock, the anger, the sense of being utterly betrayed by the very people she had loved and trusted her whole life, it was all too much. In that moment, Sherita was no longer a sheriff, no longer the composed woman who had handled high-pressure situations with grace. She was simply a woman pushed to the edge, faced with a reality she couldn't escape from, and in her eyes, there was no way out. Some have called it a crime of passion, an impulsive, heat-of-the-moment act driven by the emotional intensity of the discovery. But others argue that it was a calculated response to a lifetime of suffering, of growing distrust, of a family's hidden secrets finally coming to light. The moment Sherita pulled that trigger, it wasn't just about what she had seen that day. It was about everything that had come before it, the years of emotional pain, the betrayal by the two people she loved most, and the unbearable weight of it all coming crashing down in a single fateful moment. Experts agree that such emotional overload can cloud a person's judgment, making it nearly impossible to process the situation logically. For Sherita, in that instant, the only thing that seemed to make sense was the need to stop the pain, to put an end to the betrayal that had destroyed her. But even as she pulled the trigger, she must have known, deep down, that this moment would mark the point of no return. There would be no undoing what had been done. Now, we want to hear from you, our viewers. This case, as tragic as it is, raises so many questions about family, loyalty, and the limits of human emotion. Do you believe Sherita Williams was justified in her actions? Was it a moment of self-defense, driven by shock and betrayal, or did she let her emotions completely take over, leading her down a path of irreversible consequences? It's easy to sit on the outside and try to rationalize what happened, but the truth is, none of us can truly understand the depth of the pain and the shock that Sherita must have felt in that moment. The betrayal from her own family, the people she trusted most, was unimaginable. So what would you have done? Would you have made the same choice, or would you have acted differently? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, and let's have an open, honest discussion. Was this a crime of passion? Or was it a result of years of emotional pressure and a breaking point that no one could have foreseen? And here's something for you to think about. If you were in Sherita's position, how would you have reacted? Would you have gone to the same extreme, or would you have found another way to deal with the situation? It's a difficult question, but one that challenges the very essence of how we deal with betrayal and family dynamics. And don't forget to share your reasoning in the comments. Your opinion matters, and we'd love to hear from you. This case, though tragic, opens the door to many difficult questions about family, betrayal, and the consequences of violence. What is the true cost of betrayal? How far can a person be pushed before they snap? And what happens when that breaking point is reached? Sherita Williams, once a beacon of law and order, now finds herself at the center of a case that will forever change her life. But in the wake of such devastation, it's crucial that we ask ourselves, how much can any of us endure before we reach our limit? The pain Sherita experienced in that moment, seeing the very people she trusted most betray her in the most intimate and shocking way, is something that few could ever fully comprehend. Her actions, though extreme, were not taken in a vacuum. They were the result of years of emotional struggle, of unresolved tension within her family, and of the profound sense of loss and devastation that accompanied the discovery of her father's betrayal. The question is, how can we prevent something like this from happening again? This case serves as a heartbreaking reminder of how deeply hidden family secrets can affect individuals. It's easy to think of family as a safe space, a sanctuary from the harsh realities of the world. But what happens when that foundation crumbles? What happens when the people who are supposed to love and protect you are the ones who cause you the most harm? The emotional impact of family dynamics cannot be overstated. Sherita's story is not just about a crime. It's about the lasting scars that betrayal can leave behind. While we may never know exactly what was going through Sherita's mind in those final moments, one thing is clear. The weight of the emotional toll she endured was too much to carry. This case shows us that even the strongest among us have a breaking point. And as we reflect on the consequences of this tragedy, we are left with the responsibility to think about how we can recognize the signs of emotional distress in those around us, how we can foster healthier family dynamics, and how we can support those who may be silently struggling. Could this tragedy have been prevented? Could Sherita have found another way to deal with the betrayal and the pain? These are the questions we must ask ourselves as a society. How can we create environments where trust is nurtured, where families can heal and communicate openly, and where emotional well-being is prioritized over silence and secrets? Ultimately, Sherita Williams' story reminds us of the fragile nature of human emotions and the delicate balance required to maintain healthy, loving relationships. In the end, the cost of betrayal may not only be the loss of trust, it may also be the destruction of everything a person once believed to be true. In our next video, we'll dive into another shocking tale of betrayal and violence that will leave you speechless. A story so chilling, so unbelievable, that it will make you question the very nature of trust and loyalty. How far can one person be pushed before they retaliate? What happens when love turns into something darker? You won't want to miss it. Make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss this next episode. Click the bell icon to turn on notifications and be the first to hear the next shocking story that uncovers the true cost of betrayal. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.